thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the conversation that just took place, because this actual bill may be a solution if you do not move it to suspense. This bill is simple, and it just, I'm going to present ACR 45, and it just allows us as legislators to demand in our top departments, top 40 departments, over a period of 5 years, zero-based budgeting, meaning that they just don't automatically renew with a 10% increase or an increase in new funding or anything. And when you think about that, and you listen to the testimony that was very heartfelt by Ms. Brown and her colleague, Mr. Thurman, when they presented this, I just shared with them that could I not afford to pay $5,000 a month to put my mom in a good care facility? She would be in the same situation that they're advocating for most of our seniors. It's very expensive to have senior care. My bill is not about senior care, but I'm very sympathetic to what just happened. So this bill that I'm presenting today solves a lot of that problem. When you look at the headlines that have taken place, and you look at $500 million for bogus programming that we pay for as a legislature, and then we automatically increase their budget over that $500 million. $2.7 million when you talk about a new swimming pool in Calexico, $2.5 million to upgrade the governor's mansion, budget suspend cap and trade. These are just headlines. Caltrans is overstaffed by 3,500 employees, costing taxpayers $500 million. California State Departments play personnel shell game to keep tax dollars and empty jobs. The Parks Association that we experienced last year, where they had this, they were crying that they didn't have any money, and all of a sudden they have a slush fund. The same goes with CAL FIRE. They ended up with a multi-million-dollar slush fund. There is money out there that we are allocating to things that shouldn't be prioritized, and they should be brought back in with a zero-based budgeting to say, CAL FIRE, justify what you say you're going to spend. Parks and Recreation, justify what you're going to spend. These departments should justify to us as a legislature what they need money for. You know, this is for staff, this is for benefits, this is for this. We don't need the additional $2 million we got last year for the computer program, so let's put that someplace else. If ACR 45 was to pass, and this legislative body over a period of 5 years, I will not be in the assembly, but most of you up here on the dais will, you can look at this in each department, 5 departments over a period of, or 8 departments over a period of 5 years, and you can take them to zero-based budgeting, which brings balance and not just consistent spending in the legislature. And then there could be, and I bet money on it, I'd bet dinner on it, there is money out there, because it's been proven, because we've all been subjected to those headlines of everything that I just mentioned. Slush funds for parks, for CAL FIRE, for, you know, expansions on all kinds of things that none of us truly would really support, because I think we would support our seniors, our developmentally disabled, and others well over a swimming pool in Calexico. I'm sorry. I would. So I think ACR 45 is a huge, not maybe the full solution, but a solution, a partial solution to that issue that just arose. And working bipartisanly to make sure that this goes forward be absolutely wonderful. And I'd request an aye vote.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in support of the bill? Okay.
On behalf of Laura Parr, on behalf of the County of Kern, in support of the measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in support? Anyone opposed? Do we have any file on it with in finance, LAO? Anyone at all at finance?
Finance. We don't have a position on this resolution, but we are concerned about the workload that would fall to individual departments and to the Department of Finance to provide the analysis of the minimum funding level for viability of the departments, which is one of the things that's going to be requested of us, and to determine performance goals for presentation to the legislature and sort of the timeline outlined. The governor's executive order, B 1311, did start the process of detailed budget analysis to determine if there are programs that are going to be good candidates for performance-based budgeting or zero-based budgeting, and there's some overlap there. Our process is in full swing and will continue.
Okay, very much. Thank you. I think Mr. McCarty.
Thank you, Chair. Well, 2 things. First is, as I support the Chair's recommendation to put this issue to the suspense list, as far as the procedural thing. But secondly, is I couldn't agree with you more. This is a big issue that we need to focus on in the legislature. It's just budget oversight, whether it's zero-based budgeting or taking a different approach, and whether it's increases for SSI, SSP to help seniors, or more money to fund higher education and enrollment, Medi-Cal, so forth. We have way too many needs and not enough resources. And if you think about our budget process, for example, the UC budget's roughly $3 billion. And, this year's budget, the governor is proposing putting in another $119 million. Same as the CSU, about $3 billion and $119. So we spend all the time up here in the subcommittee, as our committee members know, focusing on that $119 and never looking back extensively at the $3 billion. And for all departments over and over. And so that's why you've seen the Assembly this year was subcommittee number 2. The Speaker laid out this, and the Budget Chair and I are working on this to take an approach to see how we can do this in a manner that kind of dovetails with the subcommittee process. Clearly, it's a big workload issue, and there are some logistics to be hashed out. But as was noted by Department of Finance, this isn't new. The governor laid this out in 2011 in an idea. Before my time here, the legislature looked at this with the state parks after what we found out a few years ago with those pots of money elsewhere. And so I think that this is the opportunity to have potentially a sea change in this effort, to bring about more oversight, to try to find the opportunity to squeeze dollars here and there to focus on the core priorities. And so regardless of how this procedure is going with this ACR 45 and to suspense, that this issue that you bring up is, I think, one that we ought all to fully embrace and make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, that was very refreshing, and I appreciate Mr. McCarty's comments. And the other subcommittee chairs that might be new. I've been here 4.5 years, and I was on Transportation Subcommittee my first term. And one of the most frustrating things of being a legislator here was the chair of the subcommittee and myself worked very diligently to make sure that we got to some votes on that subcommittee that were 5-0 with bipartisan support on lots of issues that were important to the legislature and to Californians. And then in our naivete, we were taking it really, really serious, the work that we were doing in that subcommittee. And then May comes around, and the May revise comes out, and then the June 15th deadline comes out, and all the work that we had done was just summarily dismissed by the 3 or 4 people that actually write the budget for the state of California. So, Mr. Thurman, your comments earlier in the earlier presentation, I appreciate very much. Mr. McCarty, your comments right now, and I hope that sea change is real, and I hope that the budget subcommittee chairmen and chairwomen will take those comments and take them serious and look at the ideas that Ms. Grove has presented, Ms. Olson has presented, and that bipartisan support for these ideas will actually create a sea change, and we will get a better budgeting process. The voters voted in 2010 on Prop 25 to give the majority party control of the budget. I don't think that means that you should waste the opportunity to present a good budget. I think you should take advantage of what the voters have given you and present a good budget. So with proper deliberation, with proper thought, and I think that Ms. Grove's idea certainly goes to that. And one other thing, and so that's on that, I do want to take exception to one of the things the Department of Finance said, that this would create a workload that on the departments to have to justify their expenditures. That's unbelievable to me, and those comments aren't towards the person here from the Department of Finance. That's the whole Department of Finance's attitude. If that's their attitude about budgeting, that even goes more towards supporting Ms. Grove's idea that we do this type of budgeting. That is a ridiculous attitude from a state department that's in charge of all of the budget. I don't think it's too much to ask a state department to justify the budget that they receive every year and then properly allocate it according to the the things that the legislature thinks is important based on what we're hearing from our constituents.
Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the
Okay, I want to thank Ms. Grove for her presentation. I think, you know, the concept of zero-based budgeting always has value. And I think it's the program, the proposal here is probably has, is somewhat ambitious in terms of if we look at how much time it's taken just to deal with the University of California. And we've not finished that this year. I mean, so zero-based budgeting, if it's going to have significance and not just these big broad categories that you can't figure out what's in them, requires a lot more time, we've discovered, even in dealing with the University of California. I know that the governor, there have been some zero-based budgeting that have occurred in the last couple of years, some in Caltrans, some in with Caltrans aeronautical program as well as its legal program. So there's been some done, and there may need to be more of them done. But to really put us on a schedule where we're doing 8 major departments every year, I think it would be overwhelming in terms of what we get out of it. But as well as the fact that I'm not even sure if we can complete that many in 1 year with the staff that we'd have. We'd have to increase our staff in order to be able to accomplish that. And so we've learning from zero-based budgeting with our university, and that it's probably a much longer process than what began in January. I think we talked about that. Mr. McCarty and I talked about it at the beginning, and in the process of dealing with budgets and money coming in and expenditures, if you're trying to do zero-based budgeting, you're not going to meet the June deadline starting in January. It's more than a year-long process to do zero-based budgeting, and in order to get the actual information that you want. So I don't think it's a far-fetched idea. Our speaker has come forward and basically proposed zero-based budgeting for our university system. It's a great thing. It's taking longer, obviously, than just simply doing it in a couple of months in order to get the information you want and not the big, broad categories that normally people put together in a budget that people can't deal with in terms of whether there's waste or appropriate use, those kinds of things. And so with that in mind, this bill is for suspense, but I think it's not far from our minds that we wanted, and there will be other areas in terms of looking at zero-based budgeting. LAO has done some work on some of the programs, like maybe we need to do it with our court system, making sure that the dollars that are being used, and we've done a little bit of that. Yeah, and the UC we have now, and PUC we're doing it. So it is happening. But to say that we're going to do 8 departments every year, so forth and so on, and do every department every so many years is a little bit overwhelming, I think, in terms of the amount of time would be expended. But I don't think it should be far from maybe some concept that some department is going to get zero-based budgeting every year or something of that nature. But I appreciate this. It brings it to our attention. We'll deal with it, and we'll talk with those involved. But this is an item also for subject for suspense.
May I close, ma'am?
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming and bringing this to our attention. You have ACA 5.
Yes. May I close on ACA 45 or ACA
45? I'm sorry.
Is that okay if I close on that?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I really do appreciate Mr. McCarty's comments. I do. And it's not my idea. I mean, I know the governor put it forward, and I know the speaker is working on budget sub 2 on some areas as well. You guys are going to be here for a long time. I mean, if the deadline doesn't work, extend the deadline. We extend deadlines every other day on the floor, almost. That's probably an exaggeration, but we do extend deadlines. We extend deadlines. I love the looking back period. When you said the UC system, everybody's focused. We don't ever look back at that $3 billion, and we're all focused on the new $119 million that's going through. But I'm telling you, with all the headlines that I've experienced in the 4 years that I've been here, with all the waste that government has, this is an opportunity. And if Madam Chair, if you think that it's too much to do 8 departments so we get done with it in 5 years, it's just the top departments that have over $100 million a year budget. I mean, take it to a $200 million a year budget. We've got to start looking back, like Mr. McCarty said. We've got to start looking back. Because if we would have been looking back, maybe there wouldn't have been a multi-million-dollar slush fund for the parks, a multi-million-dollar slush fund for the AOC, a multi-million-dollar slush fund for, and I call them slush funds because that's exactly what they are. They're like, oh my God, we have to spend this money so we can get it again next year and add our increase on top of it. When if we were to look back over the last 30 years of this budget, how much of that money do they really, really need? And what can we do to prioritize the situations that we find ourselves in today with developmentally disability people, with the elderly, and things like that, so that money can be used the way we see fit to use it today. So I would respectfully ask you not put it on suspense, but to vote on the issue and let it go forward so the conversation can continue. And then if you want to kill it on the floor, kill it. But let the conversation continue so that we can do more investigation on this stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Grove. Now you're at ACA 5.
So ACA 5, I'm happy to present ACA 5. It's basically it's a budget issue. It's a 2-year budget process. It's a 2-year budget process. It allows voters to approve a 2-year state budget process that integrates oversight to allow legislators to plan for both short and long-term fiscal priorities. This will help the ACA or ACR 45 that I just introduced, because we would only be dealing with current budget, the current $119 million for the UC system or the CSU system, and then the next year, while we're here for a 2-year cycle, we could do the look back period for the $3 billion that they're spending or whatever department that we choose to oversee. The current budget process occurs on an annual basis, which we all know. There's no formal real role for oversight. We say we don't have time. We're doing it every year. It starts in January. It's over in June. ACA 5 states that every 2 years will begin in 2019. The governor shall submit a budget proposal for the following 2 fiscal years. During odd number years, legislators shall conduct oversight hearings for State Department operations. You know, what are you spending your money on, which is in concurrence with ACR 45. It gives us time to analyze that instead of spending the first 6 months of the year every year on a budget. Standing committees. Standing committees of the legislature may introduce up to 5 bills to improve state operations and program deficiencies that are being discussed during those hearings. The next year will be allowed, you know, free reign like we have now for legislators to introduce any bills that they choose to do, but the first primary year is to be used for oversight. And what Mr. McCarty, like he said, is the look back period, so that we can find these dollars that are being wasted, that we've all been, again, the target of media scrutiny for wasting these dollars. ACA 5 does not alter in any way, shape, or form the governor's ability to call special session for related to a specific issue, if there's a financial emergency, a fiscal emergency, you know, the drought, or, you know, whatever issue that happens to be of the importance of the day. It's important to note that the measure will not significantly alter Proposition 98 education requirements, and it also, ACA will not alter Proposition 25 requirements and deadlines with regard to passing a biennial budget. It's an important constitutional amendment, and I would request, again, this bill not going on suspense, because I think if we have good government policy that allows us the time that we need to look back at these things bipartisanly, or even, I mean, even not bipartisanly, look back and see where the waste is coming from.
Okay.
And that way we can focus on the things that mean something to us.
Okay. Is there anyone in support? Okay.
Again, Laura Parr with Kern County in support of the measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any opposition? Is there anything from finance?
We don't have a position on this proposed constitutional amendment. We would, however, note that we currently have revenue and expenditure updates twice a year, which was also noted in your committee analysis, in November and May, and that they can fluctuate substantially and necessitate budget revisions. In the most trying years, we've had to do more than one budget a year, and despite being a young person, which I'm happy to still be considered, I do remember when we had that 07-08 budget that's bled into 09, and we've had situations in which that would be very difficult under this one.
Okay, fine. Any comments from members? Yes, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do recognize that those years were extraordinary years, and that's might be why they're called extraordinary sessions. So, but I want to, you know, Ms. Grove has been very thoughtful and anticipating opposition to her previous bill when people are saying, well, it takes time. You know, we can't do zero-based budgeting because it's going to take too much time and too much, we just don't have the time to do it. Well, now she's solved that problem by proposing a 2-year budget process, which now gives us, instead of 6 months to do a budget, gives us 2 years to do a budget. So I think that that's very good on Mrs. Grove's part, and anticipating that, and appreciate her thoughtfulness in helping California recover and become the golden state that it should be, recognizing that several other states do a 2-year budget process as well, and that somehow it works for them. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Yes.
Yeah, and just
Patterson.
a quick comment from 8 years as mayor, where we, in fact, did that kind of budgeting and zero-based budgeting as well. But think about what a 2-year budget would do for those who rely on the money that comes from the state of California. It does bring a certain counties would know for a 2-year period there would not be this concern each time budgets pop up. I think we would be producing more thoughtful budgets, and there would be predictability over a period of time for those who are looking at the state, the schools, and other kinds of things. So for all those reasons, I'm hoping that this gets serious and significant support because it is a wise and, I think, prudent approach to spending taxpayer money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson, and thank you, Ms. Grove. I think if we probably were in a position where we knew what money we were going to receive every year, it would be a good idea to have a budget that may be 5 years. But given the fluctuation I think we've seen, and even though our public may think it's a great idea, but when we have increases in resources and we can change, as we are doing this year, support for our schools, that if we had done 2-year budgeting a year before, whenever, the same budgeting would have been flat for them this year. Or if we run into a crisis and we have to cut things, it's even more devastating to go back and to take money away rather than to have a process where we are basically dealing with the budget on an annual cycle. So I think theoretically it sounds good, but given the unpredictable nature of our state budget, up and down sometimes, it becomes difficult to talk about planning 2 and 3 years in advance for a budget. And we've seen that happen even in the last few years where we've seen it go very low, and now we're in a rebound position. We don't know how good it'll be next year, so if we plan and only do this year, we may be in a better position to do things like SSI and a host of other things in the coming year because our budget situation may change, and we hope it will. But I think it's great. It's wonderful that you're thinking about us always and trying to make the budget process better.
I appreciate the chair's comments very much, and the bill does address your concern. The governor can call a special session if we have a catastrophic, some crisis happens. We can call back and fix that and interrupt our oversight to deal with that particular issue. And if we have a good year and the previous year we address the issue, there can also be a special session called where, hey, we got an additional $4 billion. Where do you think we should put it? So on and so forth. There is, it does address, it doesn't tie the legislature's hands, and it just allows stability within our communities that receive this money. They don't have to deal with this annually, and it also allows us flexibility for oversight according to ACR 5 or 45. Sorry.
Okay. Is that your closing remark?
Yes, I would respectfully ask you not put this on consent as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other? I think that's all. Thank you very much for coming. This is also slated for suspense. Our last hearing is AB 227 with Mr. Alejo, transportation funding. I thought I saw Mr. Alejo here.
He's on his way back right now.
Okay, fine. I know I saw him here. I was going to say, I'm not seeing things. Okay. We'll give him a couple of seconds. He's on his way back down. He was here. Yes, Mr. Patterson.
Previous.
Yes.
I understand the volatility and of how the state of California collects money and all of that, but I do think with the rainy day fund and with that significant effort, that does smooth out the ups and downs. It does create a reliability, and I think probably is another reason why some of the concerns about Ms. Grove's proposal have some solutions because of the decisions that we've made with respect to the rainy day fund.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members. Our transportation infrastructure, certainly we all know it needs rescuing, We can't just keep kicking the transportation can down the road, and we must invest. And that's why I come before you here today to urge your support of this bill, so that we can help relieve a portion of California's nearly $59 billion backlog in needed transportation maintenance and repair. This bill will repurpose truck weight fees and move them from the general fund back to the state highway account, equaling a nearly $1 billion investment annually. And according to the Transportation Commission's 2014 annual report to the legislature, the diversion of truck weight fees represents a net decrease in funds available for transportation. The Commission recommends that the diversion of truck weight fees from the state highway account to the general fund should cease immediately. AB 227 will also expedite the timeline for repayment of several loans made to the general fund from various transportation accounts during the economic downturn. The committee budget analysis points out that the outstanding loans for transportation total $575 million. And while the Department of Finance projects that all of these loans will be repaid on or before 2016-2017, this bill ensures that the timeline is met. AB 227 attends the Commission's report also states that these loans should be repaid to the fund from which they were borrowed and used for their original intended purposes. By diverting these transportation funds back to the original purpose and reinvesting in the roadways, we move a long way towards rebuilding our deteriorating infrastructure without imposing more debt on future generations. Again, we just can't keep kicking the transportation can down the road. We must invest today. Finally, this bill will create jobs, putting Californians back to work and ensure we have a reliable system to move California's goods and services into the global market. For California to maintain and maximize its competitive advantage in the 21st century infrastructure, and this bill gets us there. Let's make the reparation and revitalization of California's transportation system a priority and pass this bill. I respectfully urge for your aye vote, and I have several witnesses to speak in support of this bill, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yes,
You'll each have 2 minutes.
Madam Chair, Dave Ackerman, representing the Associated General Contractors. As Assemblymember Bloom has conducted numerous hearings, so we're not debating the issue of needs for transportation. The features in this bill are a result of the gas tax swap that was done, I believe, before any members at this dais had an opportunity to review that. It was the end of the Schwarzenegger administration. It was a package that was put together by then Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg and Senator Alan Lowenthal, the chair of the Transportation Committee. The transportation interests supported the gas tax swap at the time. That was an effort during some very dire budget times, Madam Chair, as you may recall, where the general fund needed help, so we shifted money to help repay bonds, as well as $1 billion into the general fund through transportation revenues. Those were temporary measures. The repayments of the loans and the gas tax swap was always put back on the table. We understand those are discussions now with the Speaker's office and the Senate for a transportation funding measure this year, and we appreciate Mr. Alejo putting these on the table and hope that they will be included in that package as it is put together. And we ask for your support of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Your next witness.
Madam Chair, Bob Naylor, representing the LA Metropolitan Transportation Authority. We support this, and I'm happy to congratulate Mr. Alejo on this bill as well.
Thank you. Any other supporters? Your name and position, please. Sure.
Jeff Severs on behalf of the California Asphalt Pavement Association in support, as well as AAA of Northern California. I'd also like to echo Mr. Nazarian's comments. You know, if we don't do this, what are the costs of further delay and when the roads crumble to a point of excessive repair? Thanks.
Michael Pimentel with the California Transit Association, Solano Transportation Authority, and the City and County Association of Governments of San Mateo County in support.
Thank you.
Angela Pontes on behalf of the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority and the Ventura County Transportation Commission in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Any opposition? Okay. Anything from Finance?
The Department of Finance is opposed to this bill because it would result in a substantial increase in general fund costs, including $2.2 billion in additional one-time costs and $1 billion in annual ongoing costs. We're concerned about shifting new expenditures of this magnitude to the general fund right now.
Thank you. Okay. Any comments or questions from the members? Yes, Mr. Patterson.
With all due respect to Finance, this is money that the truck weight fees were paid into. So this money was taken. it needs to be returned. And to have a position that we will not return it because it's expensive, all that suggests is that there were a lot of truck weight fees that were paid and that should be spent on our highways. And with respect to the packaging that's coming forward, I appreciate where we're trying to go with this, but I'm hearing an undercurrent that we're going to tax the rest of the people of the state of California, this $52 tax, in order to backfill $1 billion or so of the truck weight fee. So we've taken it from the truck weight, put it into the general fund, taken it, and instead of giving it back, we're basically going to tax the rest of the people of the state of California to make good on that. Now, if that's part of the package that comes forward, that is a hard thing for my constituents to swallow. It is difficult to justify the taking of the truck weight fees, putting it into the general fund, taking it from the general fund and putting it back then into the truck weight accounts to do the kinds of things that we know we need to have to do, and then go back to the people of the state of California and impose upon them a tax to return the weight money. That's a shell game, and I don't know what the final package is going to look like. I support this, obviously, and we'll wait to see how it unfolds, but when I hear package, I wonder what all that package means. Experience I've had here is that we've got a lot of good things in a bill, and we've got an awful lot of bad things in a bill, and we package it up together and say, how dare you vote against this? Well, I think it needs to be clean, and I think it needs to be a return without strings, as has been proposed here. This is a direct return of those weight fees to the purpose for which they were paid into. And I think the cleaner we make these decisions, the better it's going to be.
Okay. I think there's been, I'm sure there's been a hearing in Mr. Bloom's subcommittee concerning this matter. The resources we're talking about, the weight fees, really have been not shifted back to the general fund, but put into debt service. We know that. And there is a proposal at this point to deal with the issue. And so I'm going to encourage Mr. Alejo to work with Mr. Bloom in this, because there will be a proposal coming forward. It may not be the full amount that you have there because of, I think, the impact of shifting the full amount in the first year would have in terms of the debt service and the things that we have to deal with. But there is going to be movement. I know the Speaker has it as a part of her proposal, and it dovetails with some of what you're doing. And so there will be some movement in that sense in terms of the budget with regards to moving those resources back into maintenance and transportation. Yes. Did you have anything to add to that, Mr. Bloom?
Well, what I wanted to add to this is I think the entirety of the discussion today, if you take it together, provides us with a lot of food for thought. In this instance, there's a shortfall. The legislature should try to address the shortfall, but if we leave it as a shortfall, then we have, and we shift money over from one place to another, then we have less money available in the general fund to address the kinds of issues that Ms. Brown came to us to discuss. These are very real issues. We only have so much money available in the budget, and I think they're good discussions to have. But I think we have to always be mindful of the fact that we do have limitations, and if we take money from one place and plug it in somewhere else, that leaves us with a shortfall for other programs. And if we don't address the shortfall, we're just leaving that out there. And I don't think that that's anybody's, it shouldn't be our intention.
Right. Thank you. If there are no other comments from the members, you want to give us a closing comment, Mr. Alejo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad we're able to have a discussion, a serious budget discussion on this issue. for our state. But as you all know, I work very closely with the chairman, Jim Frazier, as this bill went to Budget Transportation Committee. It was unanimous, bipartisan support for this bill. Everyone recognized the need. And in those deliberations, it was made very clear that this was always intended to be something temporary. During the height of the recession, we had to make some tough budget decisions. I served my first 2 years on the Assembly Budget Committee. We made some tough choices, and we had to make some shifting of funds, but it was always intended to be temporary. These were the permanent source for maintaining our roads and highways, and as I stated earlier, we're now at $59 billion backlog. And when I think when we talk about this issue, two things. Many of us came out of local government, and the number one issue we hear from our cities and our counties back home is where's the money to our road maintenance. That's one thing, and that's probably one of the number one issues that our constituents ask from us back home. We need to repair our roads and highways are falling apart. Number two, we're talking about a recovering economy, and we're not going to keep up and strengthen that recovery and get California in better shape if we're not also maintaining our highway infrastructure that's critical to many industries, whether it's agriculture. Yesterday we're talking to leaders of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. They're all in support of this because they know that if we're going to have a robust recovering economy, it requires us to also make sure we're reinvesting money in our roads and highways. And then lastly, we all know that when we do that, we create jobs, we put people back to work in these construction jobs. So it has a multiple benefit for the state of California. But back to the original purpose, it was intended to be temporary. This is the perfect time that as we're $8 billion projected from where we were at last year so far. We should be having a discussion now that as this is the right time to shift this money back for its original intended purposes. That's all we ask. This is in line with what the speaker said her goals were for transportation this year. And if this becomes part of the budget, so be it. But our goal is to get that done, get this money shifted back to where it should be spent.
Thank you
very much,
Alejo.
Madam Speaker.
Appreciate that, and I think that is our intent and intent of the Speaker. And so we look forward to continue to work with you on this particular matter. The bill goes to suspense, but that doesn't mean it won't be funded in some way. Okay, thank you very much,
Madam Speaker, members.
I want to thank all the members for coming today. This basically concludes the business of Sub 6, and we're hereby adjourned.